Hello and welcome back everyone to the Sales Career Podcast. My name is Tyrone and today I'm talking to someone that actually I follow a lot on LinkedIn, and as soon as I see her name coming up, I hit the like button. I don't even read the post anymore because I always know that it's some good stuff in there. So welcome to the show, Krysten.
Thank you. That's very, very high praise and a high bar. I appreciate it. We'll try to keep making it worthwhile.
Yeah, let's see what we have for people today. So it's pretty cool to talk today because you call yourself the Unicorn AE or one of the Unicorn AEs. And I would really like to do a little deep dive on your career path, how you came here, and how you choose your future employer, something like that. And we will see how the conversation flows today. But before we do all that, let's do a little time travel and tell me what you would tell your younger self if you could meet yourself at the start of your career.
Yeah. So I would tell myself to keep an ownership mindset and keep an entrepreneur's mindset. I was raised by two entrepreneurs, worked in both of their organizations at a pretty young age, starting middle school for both of them. And I didn't realize that gave me an ownership mindset, that in any role that I've been in, I can see how my role affects others upstream and downstream, and I can understand how the parts work together for the whole, and therefore understand kind of where the business is heading, what might be valuable to people both inside and outside the business. So I didn't realize that I had that because that was just a thing that was kind of present in my family. But it's served me really well in my career. And I think folks that, you don't have to have that early experience to know and be curious and pay attention to both how your own organization, how the business is functioning, and then how your prospective clients, how their business functions, and be interested and curious about that, and not just the features and functions of whatever you're selling.
Yeah, sounds good. So something like not being in a silo for yourself, like in the SDR AU world where you just focus on your quota, but actually see how am I affecting marketing or how are they affecting me? And then also customer success for the internal stakeholders, but then also like customers, right? How can I have an impact on how they make money, for example, right?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Cool. I see. Then, I already praised you a bit and I already said your name, but still no one knows who you actually are. So please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, Krysten Conner. Very good to be with you. I've enjoyed talking with you as we prepped for this. And you mentioned Unicorn AE. So that's kind of just a clever-ish thing that's kind of memorable that I use for LinkedIn. And part of that also is to establish the context that I come from, right? And helping people understand. So there's lots of voices on LinkedIn, lots of people who maybe haven't sold anything in a while, but are just now, giving advice and sometimes that advice is really valid because they had really long careers. But just to kind of give people some context of where I came from and the environments that I've been in, and that colors my perspective, right? It colors and it speaks to the experience I've had, and hopefully helps people understand, if they're looking to move into those environments, kind of big tech, what does that look like from the inside? What are some things that they can do to maybe have best practices that people in really, high performing companies have? So yeah, glad it was memorable because that's the general idea.
Yeah, I actually really like it because I think it's not bragging about being a unicorn AE, but it's actually sharing your perspective, right? You can be in sales, you can be in tech sales, but it's a pretty unique perspective to have been with these type of companies that really have a trajectory and where you can really see that they are scaling or they have been scaling. So I really like that approach. But before we do a deep dive on that part, can you tell us a bit about your early career? How did you actually get into sales? Or what was even before sales? Because I think this is something that people need to know.
Yeah, like I just mentioned, started out really working in my parents' two organizations, and But decided early on, I didn't think I wanted to do that. I wanted it very idealistic. I wanted to be a teacher, wanted to change the world. And, so whenever I went to school, I double majored in history and education and taught middle school and high school, for several years. And, that was probably the toughest job I ever had, being a teacher, because very tough, academically for me, because I didn't want to be a teacher that just handed out worksheets. So I spent a lot of time like designing learning experiences and that sort of thing, but also really tough emotionally, because kids are dealing with a lot. So, I, like many teachers, burned out, and then kind of had to decide, okay, what is next? What do I want to do? And, I went back to, my family had, one of the businesses was an insurance agency, and went back and ran that for a while, thinking, I know this business, I can help. They were at a turning point. So kind of helped turn that around, and really thought, okay, this might be the path now that I've grown up a little and kind of have seen more of the world. And I did that for a while, enjoyed doing it, but the main thing I learned was I didn't want to run an insurance agency for the rest of my life. And so then had to think again, okay, well, what is it that I want to do? What is it that I'm good at and that I can make money at and enjoy doing and do good while I'm at it? And I'd been in all kinds of roles at the agency trying to turn different departments around, but the one I enjoyed the most was sales. And I had always, both in insurance and in teaching, I'd always been the one pushing for more tech. I was always interested in tech, always followed startups, had always thought like there has to be a way to do this thing better, and was always searching for a faster, smarter way to do different things. And so I wanted to get into tech, and I wanted to get into tech sales. And so kind of but I knew that with a teaching background and insurance background, that wasn't a story that would necessarily make sense on its own. And so I knew that I needed to connect the dots for people so that it would make sense for someone to hire me. And so I targeted a company that sold to education, sold to K-12. And so even though I didn't know tech, I did know sales, and I knew teaching. I knew the vocabulary. I knew the things that mattered to them. I knew their buyers. I knew their buyers probably better than anybody that was currently in the organization. And so that was a story that helped make sense, right? And so they took a chance on me, and I'm really glad they did. It was a great place to work, and it kind of launched my career in tech.
Yeah. And can we go back a step to where you said that you wanted to change the world, but then somehow, like in the teaching space, you burned out? Because I think that this is something I hear a lot about, why people burn out, and it's not like I'm working too much, but it's like I'm so attached to something and it's not taking me where I want to go, that I feel like this will never have an end. Was this something that you saw when you had this big image of I will change the world as a teacher, or how did that affect you?
Yeah. There were a couple of things. First is that public education in the US is not very entrepreneurial. It's the opposite of tech. Tech moves fast. Tech is innovative. Public education, sadly, in the US, for the most part, is not innovative. They are the last to adopt most technologies. And I had worked for entrepreneurial organizations where if something didn't make sense, you just changed it. Like you just thought about what would make it better. You tried things, you experimented. Education is not like that. So it was not a good fit. And so I think a lot of people will have that experience where they work somewhere that's just not a good fit. And you can sit there and be miserable and complain about, what it is about that organization or that industry that you don't like, or you can decide to pick yourself up and take yourself somewhere that's a better fit. And so I just knew that that's what I needed to do. I'm also a recovering perfectionist, so I definitely did work too hard. And I've done that in my career in tech. I've burned out. There have been a couple of times where I've faced really serious burnout just from trying to do too much, both because I enjoy it and because I'm super driven and very competitive. But there has to be a point. I've definitely learned over the years, and the hard way for sure, several times, to be more balanced in the way that I approach things. I can be driven, I can work hard, but I can do it in a way that doesn't lead to burnout.
Hmm. Yeah, I think we can cover that later on as well, about the competitiveness, because I think like the environment that you are coming from in your like big tech space is like something where you just need to be competitive somehow, but competitive has like these, it's like the two sides of a medal, where one is like really good because you are thriving, you really want to make an impact, and then the other one is you burn out because it's just too hard. But before we go there, I would like to know when you started your career in tech sales. Actually, that will take you back some years now, but can you remember how it was to not come from a tech background, but like stumbling into tech sales, and how you made your first moves there?
Yeah, I definitely didn't stumble into it. I was doing it very much on purpose, but it was still very difficult. The systems that you used in sales and insurance were completely different. I had never seen Salesforce. I mean, we'd used other CRMs and knew what the concept was, but I had never seen it. I had never, we sold like 8 different products, which is not that many. I mean, when Salesforce has like 300 SKUs or something, but like 8, like we were expected to do first demos on all of them. And like I had no idea what an API was. Like I was Googling a lot, an embarrassing number of things. Like I would just write things down in meetings where I was like, they just said ASP. I have no idea what that means. And so I would just sit there with my notebook and look like, I'm, really doing strategy. No, I am writing down 30 things that I need to Google after this meeting. And it was overwhelming and very hard. And so actually one of the first things I did after just a few months there was went and hired an outside sales coach, because my managers there were very young, and they were 2 folks that had just come off of being reps, and they were excellent reps, and they gave great advice, but they were very new at managing. And also, I knew that I needed more help and more coaching than they had the bandwidth to give me. And frankly, later I found out that having outside coaching is also helpful for a sounding board, to like, there's sometimes if you're struggling, or if you're like, I'm really afraid I'm not going to make quota this quarter or whatever, you might not want to say that directly to your manager, right? Like that may not be the best strategy for a one-on-one, but you can say that, freely to a coach, because your number is not attached to their number. Their only agenda is to help you get better. And so you can be very honest in that place, and they can, really help you get to the root of things. It's also very helpful to have a sounding board for things, for me at least, that was outside my own organization, where I would be like, hey, they're telling us, like this, and not just in this particular org, but many, because I worked at that sales coach for several years, where I'd be in different organizations and be like, hey, they're talking about like this strategy, or they want us to target this. But I don't know, am I crazy? Like just doesn't make sense to me. And they'd be like, yeah, no, that's happening because of X, Y, and Z. So it just helped me get clarity on stuff it helped to have a pair of eyes outside the organization to kind of give clarity, or help give more context to what was going on inside the org.
Hmm. And I imagine that you have been quite junior during that time when it comes to like selling tech, but you already decided to bring in an external sales coach. And actually, this is something where I at least oftentimes think that this is something that you do when you are in like enterprise closing big deals. You have, first of all, you have like the deal size to talk about, and then you also have the personal budget actually to afford a sales coach. How did you go around this when you were like a junior rep but already looking for external help?
Yeah, it was just definitely something super outside the box. If anyone else at that company was getting outside coaching, I didn't know it, and I had never really met anyone that was like, oh, I have worked with a sales coach. I just knew, I was like, I have to have this, or I'm just not. I have to, like, it's like getting a tutor, right? In high school, you're just like, it doesn't matter if anyone else in your calculus class has a tutor. If you need one, you get one. And so, but it was a huge gamble on myself. Like it was at the time, like for my budget, it was very expensive. But I just looked at it and I was like, well, okay, what are my alternatives? If I do this, the odds are I will get exponentially better because of the person that I was working with. Like he knew the industry. I already knew him. We worked well together. And so I was like, and the alternative, if I don't do this, is I'm going to keep floundering like on my own. Like I can learn all this the hard way. I know I can learn it, but it's going to take me, a year, 2 years to learn all these things that I can learn much, much faster from somebody who's been there. But yeah, it was a huge gamble, on myself. And so, but I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's hard to go wrong with it. I think, especially working one-on-one with someone, like unless they just have not achieved anything, which you should know from vetting them. Like if you're brand new and they're not, it's hard to go wrong. You know what I mean? Like they can, even if they can make you 30% better, you're 30% better.
Actually, I wanted to ask, like, what do you look for when choosing a sales course? Because I already heard that you do it, like, you still do it, right? It might be a different coach now, but you still have coaches around you. And I was thinking about this, but then you just said, like, anyone that has like been there, done that, and has actually had some success will get you there. But actually, I also think, because you said on LinkedIn, there's a lot of noise, right, from people that maybe are not selling themselves anymore, but they still talk about how to book meetings and stuff like that. So is there something when someone hears this now and says, like, okay, I think I actually need a sales coach, because right now I'm actually thinking about it. What should I look for when I want to make the choice?
Yeah. And I should also be careful to say there's lots of different ways that you can get coaching, get advice on how to be better. Right. And I did it I kind of waded in gradually, at first. So, I mean, definitely like following people on LinkedIn that are accomplished in whatever, field you're in, that have the resume to back it up. I mean, people give incredible content on LinkedIn for free, like just incredible stuff. And the issue there is, it's like a top trainer giving away their like exercise plans, right? Like, or their routines, like they're giving it to you, but then you're responsible for going to the gym and actually doing it, right? Like you can't just read something on LinkedIn and be like, oh yeah, that's great. And then write it, maybe write it down, maybe not, never practice it, never work it into any of your, flows, any of your discovery calls or whatever. Like that's just not going to be effective. So there's that. There's like medium investment size courses, like Aspireship has a great program. Kevin Dorsey has a great like self-paced program but neither one of those are terribly expensive. And then if you go to individual coaching, yeah, it is more expensive. But I mean, you just have to vet them out. Look at what look at their background, look at their testimonials, like what kind of people work with them, what kind of results are they talking about. And the other thing too is, even if someone doesn't say specifically, like, I'm a sales coach, like if they're pretty well established in their career, if they've been in a company 3 or 4 years, they may be open to coaching you on the side, especially if they're active on LinkedIn, if they're giving, advice. I don't think it hurts to approach people to say, like, because that's what I've done a number of times, is to be like, hey, and sometimes people will meet with you. I've had incredibly senior people at amazing organizations just be helpful and would meet with me once a month, and the agenda was up to me, and I brought my questions and how would you handle this, and how do you approach account planning. But you can get some incredible coaching, especially, I mean, I know the organization you're a part of has some really top tier sellers. So, people don't always have the bandwidth, but sometimes that's their own personal thing. They like to mentor people. They're at a place where they can do that. So that's a great place to start. If you don't, I mean, we're in sales, right? We have to ask. If you don't ask, they can't say yes.
Yeah, I think so. That's like when it comes to like going out and searching for someone, actually you need to ask them, right? You can go somewhere on a website and book a course. That of course works. But if you see someone that is like, you just like them and the way they put out their thoughts, then just write them. And actually, because you just said it, right? We have an internal mentorship program as well, where you can get matched with people. I really like these approaches too, from a company's perspective. But I also know that not every company offers this, because there might only be 5 sellers around and there's no one.
Yeah.
So, we made a little X course into the sales coaching space, but I would like to come back to your career. Can you share a bit how your career progressed then? Like this was not a unicorn, I guess, but you stumbled into different companies. And how did you actually find those companies?
Yeah. So, so the first tech company I was at was a Vista-backed startup, and I know people have strong views on Vista a lot of the times, but they did what they were doing to turn that company around was for the better, and I enjoyed working there, and they had a great team. That started to change when that company got bought out by a different company, and so as most people who've been a part of an organization that has been acquired no, it definitely starts to change things. Not overnight always, but definitely starts to change it. And I could just kind of start to see the way that things were going. Normally the acquiring organization, like they always say, oh, well, they're letting us run on our own. They're letting us just keep doing the way we're doing. Most likely not. And so, your own culture starts to adapt to the culture of the organization that acquired you. That's just going to happen over time. And so I started looking around for different places. And while I was thinking about it, I mentioned we sold eight different products there. And Tableau was actually embedded in one of the products that we sold. And Tableau is a data like visual analytics tool. And so we used that in one of our products. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I'd never heard of it. And I was amazed by it. I've always been a data person. I've always been, show me the numbers, that sort of thing. And that was actually another reason I was looking to get out of selling to education is like people in education don't think about ROI. They don't like a business case. Like they think about other things. Like they think about student achievement. Like they're looking to impact metrics, but it's not ROI. And like, I was just like, and that was a mismatch for me because I'm very much like business minded. And I have found myself having to explain ROI. And I was like, this is just not the right buyer for me. It's just not going to work out. It's not them, it's me. And so I looked more into Tableau and realized, oh my God, this is actually a really large company and they're doing these amazing things. And Tableau is also a very mission driven organization, does a lot of good things. And that also aligned with like my values of like wanting to change the world. Right. And so then I targeted them as like, okay, this is, if I'm going to leave, I want to go somewhere like this. And they, unbeknownst to me, they were actually doing a pivot where they were hiring people who could do a more outbound motion because they had reached the arc in the organization's kind of progress that most of their business wasn't coming from inbound anymore. And the people that had been there a long time really only knew working inbound leads, and they hadn't had to go hunt down anything. And I was in primarily a hunter role. And so that was a good fit. And started working for them after that, and really didn't realize how good it would be as far as like the level of enablement there, the culture, the exposure to like what really, really smart companies do, and like they're, doing well and doing good, and like the caliber of sellers there. It was the learning curve there. I also felt lost there for like the first several months. I was Googling. If I Googled before, I was definitely Googling because Tableau sits on top of the whole data pipeline. And I was just like, the first few months, it was rough, but I hung in there.
Crazy.
So, yeah. So, I just said a lot of things. There's a lot there.
No, all good. I can see myself like 3 years ago when I Googled sprint, when I started in the startup and I had no idea what a sprint is. Yep. And I actually had to Google that right in the meeting because I didn't know what everyone was talking about. So this was really like, and when you work for Tableau, actually you see all these charts, and I was working with them. Actually, I pulled up some numbers today in Tableau, and I already saw like these things, and I'm not a data person. I'm not a numbers person. And I look at this and I'm like, wow, I need to get out of this again. So I can see how you needed to Google stuff. But actually, I wrote something down where you said that was right at the beginning, and I didn't know the term Vistra company. Can you clarify what that is?
Yeah, sorry. So Vista Equity Partners, it's a VC firm, and so they generally like take over companies that need to be turned around. And they have what they call like their SOPs, standard operating procedures, that are these very like very literally closely guarded secrets into how they turn around like struggling tech companies. And I mean, and it's very systematic, very programmatic. Like they come into an organization, they've just set up all these things. And so if you are in the middle of a company that's being like taken, that's been purchased by Vista, it can be like a difficult process to start to change all of these things, right? Anytime you have to change everything, it's painful. I came in, Vista had owned them for quite a while, and like they were like had already turned the corner. And so I was there I was like, oh, well, seems to be working great now. I wasn't there at, at like the part that was painful for some. And so people that have been a part of Vista backed companies will generally have a pretty strong opinion one way or the other. And I can definitely see it from all perspectives. So that's why I gave a disclaimer. Like people have strong feelings about it lots of times.
Yeah. So you also said something about Tableau, where it was like you came into the company and you first of all felt lost, but then you saw that there are really some people that can guide you, some good enablement, and like the resources that you actually need. Can you get a bit specific around what that was, what actually helped you achieve what you've achieved at Tableau?
Enablement at Tableau, one of the things that stood out to me in the boot camp that they did was, first of all, when they taught you to demo, they taught you to demo to the so what. Which is like, if I'm going to show you something that this product does, the next thing out of my mouth better be the impact, right? Because otherwise, why am I showing it to you? Because we don't want to just feature dump, right? Like and the person on the other end of the call, the meeting, like you can't expect them to automatically, in the time you're talking, connect the dots of, oh, this is what it does. This is how it impacts what I'm looking to do. So that was definitely an aha moment for sure. So that was definitely a thing that their enablement, team did that was excellent. There were also a lot of excellent internal resources about understanding the business and the metrics and the vocabulary of the different personas that they sold to. And I understand that a lot of organizations don't have that level of resources, but even if you are, one of 5 AEs at a company, you can go and start to build that out for yourself, right? Like, who are my personas? What do they care about? What problems do we solve for them? And many times, I mean, if you're a part of a team that has any sort of marketing already has that. You know what I mean? So go to them and say like, hey, when you're marketing, who are you targeting and what language are you using? And notice your own web page. Notice the words that they're using. Notice your customer stories. And whenever one of the personas that you're selling to is in your customer story and they have a quote, like, what problems did you solve for them? Like you don't have to be at a unicorn company to have that. It's handy because many times, they've done that for you. But you can definitely do that. You can chase that down yourself. And speaking of kind of doing things yourself, one of the most helpful things that I was a part of while I was there was called Rookie Roundtable, which Wenn was a rep there who was like a legend because he basically onboarded like his whole team. Like he was the only one that wasn't new the year before I started. And he was like, I can't answer all these questions like on a one-off basis. So he just started this, what he called Rookie Roundtable, where it was just like a ask me anything. And he just let the whole team kind of come. And so the next year, somebody else on that team took it over from him. And what it became was there was a whole bunch of us that were new all at the same time. And we just met, I think once a week or maybe every 2 weeks. And it was just a session about like, what is working? What's not? What are you hearing? What do you still have questions about? And we would start to, when we started to get into questions that we couldn't answer for ourselves, there were probably 12 of us. And we started inviting people that we had met in boot camp or knew some other kind of way, to people from product, people from marketing, people from support, to be like, hey, there's 12 of us, come talk to us. And we have questions around this particular thing. And frankly, it was a lot faster for them to come and talk to 12 people than to have 12 people ping them right? And ask them like, what does this mean? Can I pick your brain? Can I sit with you for 15 minutes? And we recorded the sessions. And so then we could, give those to other people. And then in every other, I took that with me. And so in other places where I went, I just started putting a meeting, an optional meeting on people's calendars saying like, I think some places we called it rookie roundtable. Other places I just have said like newbies unite, and that's the name of the meeting. And, so we just so you can definitely learn from each other. More is more on like putting heads together. And I definitely learned at Tableau from Vince and from other folks that you can be a teacher and a learner, right? Like you can learn, you can still be in the process of learning things yourself, but you're 3 months ahead of someone else. You're a year ahead of someone else. You might not feel like you have it all together like somebody who's been there 5 years, but you definitely know more than someone who started a week ago, right? Like you can do both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually love these like peer learning sessions where it's not someone from like leadership or even enablement, right? Because they have good intentions, but most of the time it's like, okay, I have to come to this meeting. I sit down, I listen, and then I leave again. And sometimes I take something away. It depends on the person, but sometimes I have just sat there for an hour, did something, and then now I can move on with my day. But in like peer learning sessions, it's always like, okay, hold on. What did you say? How do you mean that? And it's like way more engaging. And I actually saw something, in my previous team where I was a team lead and they did a session without me, and it was way better than if I would have been there because everyone was like speaking freely and no one was like afraid of saying something wrong or anything like that, right? They just went in and did some sessions, and I really loved that, right? And then I really thought, okay, you need to have this on a regular basis and leave me out of this.
Yeah, no, and our leaders like commented the same thing, and they learned to really like love, and they started asking us like, oh, I saw you had so and so from product like join that meeting. What did they say? What were your takeaways? So yeah, it was really powerful, and I think it kind of speaks to like I talked about like having an ownership mindset. Like if you don't see something in your organization that you want, like just complain that it's not there. Like start it. And that it helps and it ends up helping not only you, but other people. And, it may be something that, helps, 20x of the, more than just yourself. Right. And other teams saw that and started catching on like in other departments. So, I mean, it can really impact a lot of people, much more so than just wishing it was there and not doing anything about it.
Yeah. That sounds like a really great learning when you also took it to your next company, right? And I think time is running, and I would really like to do a deep dive on that again. But I would really like to ask one question before we leave today, and that is like, what do you actually look for when you are like looking for your next company, or what would you advise someone that is in this big tech space and they maybe have been burned out before, but they are still thriving to be competitive and like the nature that you are actually? What would you advise them to look out for to choose a company that might be a unicorn company?
Yeah. And my objective was not necessarily to work for unicorn companies. It worked out that way, but because what I was targeting was not that. I think that going about it that way is probably misguided. Other than large companies do have different resources, right? Like being at Salesforce working at Salesforce was definitely something that was on my like career bucket list, because I wanted to see like what do their internal processes look like? I mean, right? Like they are like this, behemoth kind of gold standard. And so being there and seeing how they did things, how they thought about things, it was incredible. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I also learned I didn't want to be employee number 60,001. But there's trade-offs, right? I mean, so that's the other thing is I think you learn in every environment, you learn what's for you and what's not for you. So what I've learned is I like being in organizations where I can contribute and not just be like at a really large company. They don't necessarily take your advice on like, this is how we should shape the demo, or this is how we could tweak discovery. It's just like, here's the talk track, go certify against it by next week, and then do it. It was not my favorite. I like building things. So I started looking for organizations where I could help build things. I also wanted to, for me, the buyer is very important, because I learned from being at the when I was selling to education, and there was a mismatch between me and the buyer, because I wanted to talk about ROI. They didn't want to do that. My personality, like, I move fast. I am not risk averse, and the buyer was very different than that, and that causes a lot of mismatch, right? Same when I went to Tableau, the IT, like, technical buyer was a part of all of our evaluations. And that is like a very deliberate, specific personality that is like skeptical. They're not transparent for the most part. Like, and so I started to really think about, okay, what are the conversations that I enjoy having? Who do I like talking to? Like, I like talking to sales and marketing. And also, like, if you enjoy the conversation, chances are the other person enjoys it too, and vice versa, right? Like, if you have a disconnect with the person that you're supposed to be helping, it's just not going to go well. And so, like, and I also have also chosen, like, products that I'm inherently interested in, because I'm sure that I could sell something that if I saw that it could help people, I could probably sell it, because, like, it's important to me that the product actually work and actually help someone in their career. So that is number one. But the other thing is, if I'm inherently interested in what the product does, it's just that enthusiasm, like, energy transfers, right? And so I've always, this is just me, other people do it differently, but I've always looked for, what are things that I am actually, spaces I'm actually interested in, that I pursue and learn about outside of work, because I care about it. Do I like what the product does? Do I like the conversations I'm having? So those are probably maybe different things than other people are thinking about. And then, of course, there's the culture fit. I'm looking at things like RepView. I'm looking at things like Glassdoor, to understand what do people inside the organization say about working here, who's hitting quota, who isn't. Those are certainly important, but I think the other things, kind of the conversation, the buyer, the industry, I certainly didn't think about that early on in my career. And, but when the more I thought about that, and the more I targeted companies, according to that, the better fit I've had.
Yeah, I can totally understand. It's like actually when I'm being poached by recruiters right now, it's like I'm reading what they say, and I'm looking like at the industry, and then thinking about the persona and the conversations you might have, and I'm like, no, I wouldn't like to spend my day in that direction. And that's actually something why I chose Seismic, because I know that they are selling to sales and marketing. And when I was learning actually tech sales, I talked a lot to salespeople, and I was like, actually, if these could be my buyers, there would be like idea, right? I can have like day-to-day conversations, share my own perspective, get out of them, like, how are you using this? And then like the selling is something on the side somehow, because you can talk about your day-to-day, and yes, you do have to do discovery and demo and all this type of things, but it's like a peer conversation in best case. And this is where it really hits a moment, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say, like, the best sellers that I saw at Tableau were very technical. They were interested in, like, how the sausage was made, right? Like, they were interested in tech and the back end and how these things all talk to each other. And same at Salesforce, like, there were people that were definitely subject matter experts in, like, that particular industry. Like, I think if you care about something and you enjoy the people that you're talking to within that industry, regardless of whether you're a peer, whether you've done that or not, if you enjoy it and you learn about it, you're naturally going to sound more like like you said, like an insider, like a peer. You're going to sound more like someone that they talk to on a regular basis. And those conversations just go better because you have more in common.
Yeah, 100%. Krysten, I think there's like so many things that we can talk about, but actually the time is gone. We have been through everything today. And I would really like to thank you, first of all, for coming on the show, sharing your perspective. I know you are pretty busy with the job you do, but thanks for taking the time. And right now would be your moment. The stage is yours. You can ask for anything you want, and people might follow you there.
Ask for anything I want. I thought that was, the conversation was taking a turn. Got it. All right. No, so I was like, are we granting wishes now? I've never been on a podcast where it does that.
I wish I could. Let's see what comes.
Definitely a different angle, right? Yeah, cool. No, so definitely most active on LinkedIn, trying to share with people, what's working, what's helping, because I think in an enterprise space, that was definitely something I was looking for on LinkedIn 3 years ago, right? Was someone who was an enterprise practitioner, not transactional, not SDR, like in an enterprise, or like large commercial space, what's working. So share a lot of that there. You'll find a link to my newsletter there. And then also day job is at User Gems, where we're helping sales teams find their champions, their past buyers, and then sell to them again, right? Especially in this environment where buyers are even more cautious, where budgets are even tighter. Finding those, like you were talking about, those warm conversations is really important. So it's having a lot of fun helping sales teams do that.
Nice. I will put like your link and the User Gems link in the show notes so people can find that and actually check it out. I really think that I've looked it up already. I really think the idea is great, and I would love something like that where I can find my past buyers and make them buy again at a new company. So yeah, that's the plug to User Gems here. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, and I really enjoyed the conversation. Speak soon, Krysten. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks for having me.